The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Bronxnet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. I am tempted to open tonight's show with a terrible pun that the proposal for an animal shelter at 2050 Bartow Avenue in Corp City has community residents fighting like cats and dogs. But, well, I ought to not go there. On the other hand, yes, it has become a controversy that has pitted animal advocates against various groups and electeds over whether that site in Corp City is the right one for the Bronx's much-needed animal shelter. So tonight, we'll try and stay out of the fray, but delve into the discussion as to what is right and wrong with the site so you can be informed and make up your own mind about the issue. It is a complex issue. We've invited two community members to present their points of view on the merits of the site. From a group called Bronx Animal Rights Electors, it is Roxanne Delgado. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And also a Corp City resident, Mr. Martin Prince. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I do want to mention at the top of the show, we did invite the Community Board 10. They had said they were against the current site. Unfortunately, they chose not to be here. There's not much I can do about it. I wish they would have. We never support not participating. But we also welcome Bronx residents. The station is your view, your voice, your views, your vision. Here they are, your voice, your views, your vision. Nice to have you with us, Ms. Delgado.
Thank you.
So let's talk. You have been passionate about the need for an animal shelter. Why do you think we need one? Now, it is mandated now by the city that we get one. Why do you think we need one? And then we'll talk about that site.
Okay, first, thank you for inviting me to your show, and thank you for showcasing this issue that seems to be the talk of the town.
Or at least that part of the town.
Yes.
Anyway. That's right.
Well, I think we are in all agreement that the Bronx is a pet desert and lacks services for pet parents, I'd like to say, and also doesn't have its own facility to house its homeless and abandoned animals, and we actually overburden the other existing shelters in the other three boroughs, because we are, despite the fact that we make up 15% of the citywide population, 25% of the animals surrendered are originate from the Bronx. So we
Really?
actually, yes, and we're actually overburdening the other shelters, means less time, less space for these poor animals, less care, and mostly they're euthanized for lack of space. And this is a needed resource because, as I said, in Fordham Plaza, every Tuesday they have a small pet mobile, vet mobile.
I do think we have a picture of that, so we're going to show that picture while you explain it. But go
And
ahead.
people, there's a first come, first served basis, and it only has limited capability. It doesn't resolve extreme medical issues, and many people make lines in harsh weather to get care for their pets because there's no facility in the Bronx to handle those.
It seems an extreme situation.
quite extreme.
As I said, it is mandated. It's been mandated by law that every borough has to have one. Bronx and I believe Queens don't have one,
Yes.
and so we're supposed to get one. This idea of Bartow Avenue came up. The mayor has endorsed it. The City Planning Commission hasn't endorsed it. Why do you think it's the right place to put it there?
Well, I guess city planning realized that this is not just a Bronx issue, it's a citywide issue, like I said, with overburdened other shelters, but also because this has to be, it's very hard to find city-owned property that is, has adequate space for an animal facility, which requires special building, and also it's because despite the no pet policy in Co-op City actually has the highest concentration of service animals. So it also will serve the needs not just for the Bronx, but also includes Co-op City. This site is visible, and this will be a state-of-the-art facility that will actually be a new model of how the city cares for its homeless pet population. It's not going to be a pound where you dump animals, warehouse them, and dispose of them. It's about placing them in forever homes. So it has to be in a commercial strip where there's existing traffic, not in an industrial site where it's unseen, unheard of. So this is a new approach to address the extremely critical conditions of homeless animals, just like we have homeless people.
Let me just ask you this, having sat in this seat for a long time, one of the places that was discussed many years ago, because I think there is unanimity about whether or not we need a shelter, and certainly the Bronx has been underserved. Many years ago was at the Fordham Library, the old Fordham Library that many of us remember, was it on Marion Avenue, just down the block from Fordham. If that were suggested now, and it can't be, I think the property's been dealt with in another way, would you say that was an adequate place?
But that's very hypothetical. That site's not
It
available.
is
It's not available. If
no,
it was,
I understand that. If it were suggested, would you say, hey, you know what? That's not. It's centrally located. There's mass transit and all.
Well, this centrally located argument is a false narrative, because either if it's posted in the middle of the Bronx, drop in the middle of the Bronx, there will still be people that will need to walk there, take different buses there, take a train or bus,
well,
vice
of course,
versa.
doesn't matter where it is. The borough is big enough.
And also regarding the city did a multi-year exhaustive search to find a site that meets all the criteria, the zoning, size, visibility, accessibility. So this site is appropriate, and the other sites that they rejected were mostly because they were not available. They were just available for leasing.
Yeah, they were for any number of reasons.
And
Mr. Prince, time to let you in. So you've been at Co-op City for how long?
26 years.
And you and frankly, I've heard, I mean, just kind of getting an idea, many Co-op City people are not happy about it. Well, what do you think?
Well, as I said, you know, Co-op City is turning 50 this year.
Congratulations.
Big birthday for it. And
one of the most successul, maybe the largest housing projects in the nation.
okay, and
So you get my endorsement on that level.
And as you know, it's somewhat isolated in that corner of the Bronx. I lived in lower portions of the Bronx. I travel around the Bronx. It's difficult to get to Co-op City. Mm-hmm. Okay, I lived there when I commuted back and forth to work. We all know the experience of kind of getting in and out of Co-op City.
Mm-hmm. So on that level, for you, you're asking people to somehow get there. There's no real, I mean, the mass transit, was it the number 12 bus that goes across the Bronx, and you can get there. There's no real mass transit there.
Right, not direct connections. And for some people in the Bronx, not that. One of the arguments is that you can't get on public transportation with the animals and that kind of thing. But I think that having it in the extreme northeast corner of the Bronx, it'll add a burden to constituents that want to utilize that animal shelter, because they may not have the means.
So your
resources.
first thought is centrally located.
Centrally
now we know
located.
they'd have to travel from somewhere, but there could be mass transit from there. What about just the notion of having it there in Co-op City? Self-contained, people drive up, they utilize the services. Is there a discussion of disturbance, let's say, to Co-op City?
Well, I think part of the
and I'll let you weigh in. We'll have a dialogue.
Part of the issue goes in terms of how we look at our municipal services and our interactions with city officials. For the 26 years I've been in Co-op City, they have been looking at that area and saying, do something for our community, for our residents with that little parcel of land, because the land, Co-op City was designed, developed, okay, and you're talking 15,000 units of apartments, another additional possibly 2,500 with the other senior centers around, and during that time period, the needs of the residents of Co-op City have changed, and
So I'm going to ask you about that, and then we'll start at that with you. Why hasn't that happened already? This is 50 years. The need has been there all along. And then I'll add along, certainly in the Northeast Bronx, we're getting a YMCA over there in Baychester, in Edenwald. And would that be sufficient?
well,
And let me just add one other question to it. You start now for the planning of a community center. You're still looking well down the road. There's a lot, there's no guarantee it's going to come through. Somebody's got to programming it. I mean, it's very easy to say, and let me just add one more thing. nobody could be more for community centers than I am, and I'm on the record on this program for years. But I'm just curious about the viability of that discussion.
Well, again, then this is my opinion, and
That's
how
why you're here, my
I
friend.
see it. But you know, the needs of our community are changing. We're in a naturally occurring retirement community. In addition, there's at least 4 senior residents right in our proximity. Okay, so you're talking a sizable population. And right now, no one is looking at the crisis that is coming for us on the medical side, you know, and
So are
we're
you
gonna,
suggesting even a medical facility of some sort?
well, if it's
You're
gonna,
just saying there should be better use of the land. for
yes,
the
and it should take into consideration the needs of the citizens. Now, again, that's not to say no animal shelter. We definitely need an animal shelter
in the Bronx.
in the Bronx.
You
Yes.
just think it's the wrong spot.
I just think it's the wrong spot.
What about the community center idea? Listen,
first-
nobody wants to measure human beings and their needs versus animal
I
needs.
agree,
But it makes a compelling point.
With all due respect to Mr. Prince, first, it is a transit hub because there's 2 shopping centers, the Bartol's Shopping Center and the Bay Plaza. The fact that it has 2 shopping centers is a mass transit hub. There's trains accessible, there's off-site parking, and there's buses that go, 11 buses that go directly to the Bartol's Bay Plaza. Second, regarding the community center, no one's against any community center, but in all fairness, like you mentioned needs, in the community board statement of needs, even in the last recent one, last year, they mentioned a special reference for a need for its animals full-scale shelter, but nowhere did they mention any community center at that site or nowhere else in Co-op
Another
City.
site.
Now that the city proposed animal facility, all of a sudden a campaign has been raised to promote a youth center to create competing needs. And in my personal opinion, is to shield a developer who has spent over $200,000 to develop 2 30-story development in that site.
It was said, and I've got it here, is that if affordable housing is built, then they would build a community center. First Hartford Realty said it would include it, a community center. I want to suggest this. Did you want to react to that before?
Let me just say this.
Sure, and I'm going to show you something else that's going to make us all think of something else. Go ahead.
All right, you ready? I'm 63. Okay.
Nobody's counting.
I was 13 when Co-op City was built. And they were looking, in fact, the promise to them as they made up this community was we are going to give you the services and we're going to make sure in the education park, but that's not
That
open.
was, I happen to have been alive also when Co-op City was created, and that was part of the model. There's no.
Yeah, and that was
I'd
the
like to,
promise.
Mayor.
Now, over those years, and it is not true that over the years, Co-op City residents, as well as the community board, looked at that site from the time that has been there and saying, we'd like to have that site for Co-op City's use. Now, as I said, times have changed, times have evolved. We are in the Bronx, the 62nd county in the state in
healthcare.
terms of
I
healthcare.
think that's well documented.
Now, in the past, I don't know, you may have seen when the nurses from Montefiore came up, I stood up and appealed along with them about the conditions
When was
that
that?
are happening. Oh, that would have to be 2.5 years
Okay.
ago. Okay. And they've been
So
coming.
what you're saying is the dialogue has been there, it just hadn't been up front. I want to
you know, the dialogue has not been really put on the table.
I see.
Now, in
And
this
you're
situation,
saying now it's time to put it on.
it should have been put on the table. I think it kind of ignores the needs,
Right.
the changing needs of our borough.
You
May
want to
I please
respond to that,
respond?
but I really want to show you
Yes,
something interesting.
sure.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that no action or any public record was ever taken to propose a youth center at that proposed site or anywhere in Co-op City. Not the borough president or the council member allocated 1 penny for any development of that site for a youth center, community center. But now that the city proposed
Right,
this
you
facility,
said that.
and also this will provide other jobs besides retail jobs. This will actually
Mm-hmm.
open the veterinary career to unrepresented community that Black and
Well,
brown.
could you get that representation at another site? In other words, people wherever the thing is built, you would get.
But the thing is, there's there's many sites for youth centers, even in Co-op City, but there's none
No,
for
no, I
these
meant
animals.
in terms of job development. I mean, wherever it's built, I mean, somebody's going to get those jobs.
Yeah, but these jobs will not be retail jobs. This is what Bay Plaza has. This would be jobs where
Yes,
actually
I
open a career
understand.
path for the young people to create a veterinary field career.
Let-
This is
let-
something that I would love that
let
opportunity.
me, let me pose this. The borough president came out against that particular site, but in his response to the ULURP, and we're going to put the quote up there, and this is what I want to propose. At my public hearing, the applicant stated that 14 sites were reviewed, yet I was not aware that such a review was being undertaken. I cannot help but think that had my office been aware that the process was underway, a suitable site that satisfied all stakeholders could have been identified. Similarly, at my public hearing, among those expressing opposition to this proposal, numerous references were made to the lack of communication between the city and the community. Here too, had there been an ongoing dialogue between Co-op City residents and the applicant of the many concerns expressed at the public hearing, would have been resolved beforehand. Instead, many speakers stated plain and simply they felt disrespected. So my point for bringing that up is taking the dialogue away from both of you and saying, you know what, we had this proposal for a jail that the mayor came and said, this is where we're putting the jail. And the people in that neighborhood had similar kinds of dialogues, although there was more unanimity against the proposal. But the frustration amongst Bronx elected officials was that the city never came to us. So I guess it's hypothetical, but saying, hasn't this process really made this a very bad dialogue? Shouldn't we have had a review,
Absolutely.
talk to the borough president, talk to the community board, talk to residents, and then selected a site and then and gone from there? You don't like the idea?
First,
Now,
let
let me just
yeah,
say,
I'm not
let
getting
me,
my
let
time
me,
in, but
You're
it's
getting
okay.
plenty of time. Go ahead.
you know, I'm mellowing in my age, so I don't debate as fiercely. So I don't want
all
to.
right.
I didn't want to look at it
But
as
just
debate.
respond to
However,
that. Did you?
there was a point that you made, and it's well known that former borough president Carrion had put seed money for a youth center. Former Councilman Seabrook had tried to dedicate funds. It was supposed to be
For
in
that
conjunction
space or in general in Co-op
in
City?
general, to develop in conjunction with the Gloria Wise Boys and Girls Club, which used to operate there. So it was known.
it's out
it was
there, is what
known,
you're
and
saying.
it was out there. But again, my point is, though, even then, there needs have changed. And as I said, 50 years. Now I'm 63.
Right.
I'm looking at how am I going to go into my later years. Am I going to wind up being in a hospital?
So
Let me finish.
I'm
I'd
sorry,
like you
go
to let
ahead.
me finish. Will I wind up being in a hall bed if something comes up for me and I need to go to an emergency room? I've had relatives that had to be in hall beds waiting for beds at that hospital. And it's a terrible thing. We've had people come when the community board had open forums. People came and spoke about terrible, terrible situations of people sitting in hall beds.
So you think it's a possibility to put it there now? Go ahead. You want to?
First, it would have been nice if the borough president attended his own public hearing because he perhaps would hear the side of the supporters.
That's okay.
I'm just saying, I'm responding to his quote that you read to me. And second, I disagree. I'm not here
Well,
to.
that's not really
I'm not here
relevant to the
defending
quote.
the city. I'm not defending, but at the same time, why punish the community because some people feel the city didn't do adequate outreach to the community? Why deny the Bronx its fair and equitable share of pet services and deny animals a fair opportunity to get a forever home because some people feel that the city didn't approach them properly?
I don't follow that argument. All I'm saying is that the process was wrong and that the city should not have denied anybody anything, but the city should have said, let's really review this. Let's work with the borough of the Bronx and maybe found another place.
Well,
Do you think there's no other place?
There hasn't because we have approached both the city council member, we have approached the borough president, the community board. All three of them said,
Well, but there are 12 community boards in the Bronx.
no. When they offered that, they said they're going to offer another site. Not one in the proposed alternative site. All just say, not here. That's the response. What is the alternative? There's no plan B.
But
Well, there was
that's
no
that
conversations.
is what the borough president is saying. is that had we come up with a collective collaborative
But
plan.
what prohibits him from proposing an alternative site? He hasn't proposed any.
Okay, well that, you know.
We have
it's-
spoken
it's-
to him.
it's
He
a
has. He
question.
still hasn't proposed, and neither has Andy King. I mean, no, excuse me. Neither has City Councilmember Andy King, nor has Committee Board 10 proposed. They just say not here.
The
Is their
borough
response.
president's office told me that they were looking at it and trying to, I mean,
They said that 5-6 months ago, and they're still looking. And they were.
Well,
it took the city.
it takes a long,
And that's exactly. It takes a long time, and the property that they looked at initially, those 11 properties that were many of them city owned, are no longer available. There already been RFP for the affordable
other
housing.
uses.
That means that we're going to, if God forbid that our Speaker Corey Johnson doesn't take the leadership, and might have to say not permit one of his members to be a barrier to this beneficial project for the whole community, not just the Bronx, not just Co-op City. By the way, there's many, we don't speak about the people in Co-op City that actually support this, because many of them, over 500, signed a postcard, and they actually have sent emails to the city council.
What's your sense, Mr. Prince, about people in Co-op City? I mean, you're speaking for yourself, and I'm sure you talk to many of your
I would
neighbors.
say, I would say, you know, everybody's homing in again about a community center, okay? And that was a long lost promise. But we've evolved now. The Bronx is growing, and we're putting water into the cup of population in the Bronx, and that cup is going to overflow. And it's already showing the signs of overflowing, okay? Because, again, until it happens to you or a relative of yours, the
I've gone through
devastation
hardship, but
of
I'm not gonna
sitting
mention-
and seeing that and leaving that unaddressed is very much short-sighted on the part of the city planners. Okay? Now, yeah, it's more convenient because the land is city-owned and
visible.
there's no cost to the city.
Well,
on that.
well, yes, 'cause
However,
it's-
there is enough, you know, there's enough development going on in the Bronx and other areas of the Bronx, central areas of the Bronx, and it may become a choice of, do we have to invest to the animal shelter? But we must look after the health of our citizens.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Prince. Let's just say, that you know, the city agrees with you or others, and ultimately they decide not to build it. Is the need, and certainly Ms. Delgado would agree with this, is the need for an animal shelter as immediate, as important? And if you lose that site now, what do you do next?
If
You know
the
what I
animal
mean?
shelter loses the site.
You're basically gonna be waiting for another RFP, another selection process, et cetera.
Well, I think the way the process went didn't take that into consideration. It just didn't.
That is
again,
what the borough president was suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to set up, you know, priorities for our citizens, we better pay attention to those priorities.
Well, to the citizens would be my.
You know, as far as a youth center, sure, that would be nice. That would be nice. But you know what? That isn't even the priority. And
You
no
think
one's
the
looking
priority
at the
is senior
priority.
and senior health care?
Healthcare, absolutely.
So the next step is the city council, right? That's what we're looking at.
city
I mean,
council is-
everybody's weighed in.
It's under final review of the city council, and we're hoping that our speaker, Corey Johnson, might actually realize that. I mean, I'm sure he's aware because he is known to be supportive of humane issues. And by the way, animal shelter does not
So
prevent.
you're hoping he would lean, for example, on Councilmember
yeah,
King
animal
to
shelter will not
support it.
prohibit a youth center from being built anywhere in Co-op City. We actually can have both. We're hoping that perhaps Speaker Johnson may actually have not allow one of his members to be a barrier for a beneficial project for the whole community.
Well, that's interesting. What if they were to say we can find room for both? You would say, okay.
Well, if they could find room for both, that would be fantastic. In fact, if they could,
Maybe I'm just thinking outside the box. Make the animal shelter smaller and find it.
They can't
look,
do that.
even
She
even
said-
No,
you
no,
know
they
what?
said it
You
was at
wanna-
the city
you-
planning.
You know,
Okay.
let me just say this.
was just thinking out loud.
Okay, you know, as we move into what we call the millennium, the bridge to the 21st century, et cetera. Okay, you put that animal shelter there. If it was gonna be able to benefit the youth as well, do we have? No one speaks about how do we
Well, she
bring.
talked about giving jobs and having.
No,
They
no,
can
no,
have,
no. But
programs
and
for
that
children.
that point, I'm talking about where we'd had a program that we are educating and training.
There's an educational
So-
component of the facility. It's
So
not
you
just
you like the, you
know,
would like
I
that
mean,
idea.
if you sit down and you talk, you negotiate, you talk and see what you can work out with some of that. That would also benefit in terms of education of our children as well.
Actually,
Something
there
else
is
we
an
lag
educational
behind.
component, and there has been existing educational components of this. It's not just an animal shelter and a low-cost veterinary care facility. It's also educational component to teach children responsibilities, volunteering, reading programs, how to rehabilitate animals. You know, maybe divert them to the medical care industry because as we're getting an aging population. Also, it has resources for Bronx pet owners. And just, you know what, there's a need. There's over 1.4 million residents in just the Bronx. We are in need of an animal shelter. There's none in the Bronx.
Just to
None.
conclude, because we're almost out of time, the site is there. You think the opportunity is there right now to do this, and if you were to lose that site, you think it's going to rewind the clock, and the immediacy of the need is going to be lost.
Well,
right?
there's this, again, there's this real estate interest involved that wants this site for development.
Well, but that's
they
not
have
what I asked you,
no,
but-
I mean, but they have the funding. They have the law that mandates a full-scale shelter in the Bronx now, and they have the site located after years of intensive search. Why are we going to pass this opportunity that is a needed?
Well, I mean, I can answer that as devil's advocate. We are because there are people who don't agree it's the best.
But you
But
know
there's
what?
always going to be
When-
opposition to every project, but we have to look into the
When-
needs of
when-
others.
We'll give you the final word. We're almost out of
When
time.
you look at the history of this, okay, 2.5, 3, 4, I don't know how many years they were doing it because they didn't consult with any positions in the
This,
in the-
frankly,
in the
was
community.
my concern because I
They
hear about
consulted through
self.
the community
Now-
board, which shut them
now-
down. That's the Euro process. They went to the community board like they did,
when-
but they shut them down. They wouldn't even
Okay,
listen to them.
let's-
But
let's-
let's
You
be
know,
fair, because that's
I-
misinformation.
again, I didn't come as a debate.
I'm sorry, but
All right,
that was
now
Let's just
misinformation.
finish up
let
because
me
the clock
finish
is
my
going to run
please,
and
let
we're
me-
going to have to go.
Let me finish my
Sure,
thought.
sure.
Now, this has been in the pipeline prior to that law mandating a center in the Bronx.
Yes.
And in conjunction with that law mandating that center, the city now has the power of their eminent domain. So it's not, they're going to have to,
City-owned
they
property,
can,
it's not
it
eminent
doesn't
domain.
have to, but it
Clearly,
doesn't have to
the
be city-owned
dialogue
property.
is going to be ongoing. If people agree with you, how do they get to you, or what do they do?
Please contact
Do it
Speaker
quick.
Corey Johnson and ask him to please support this facility
And-
that's needed in the Bronx.
And if people agree with you, what should they do?
Bronx and
or
Morris.
at this
Well, I
point?
would hope that they contact
They could do the same thing, or
Councilman King as well as Corey
There you
Johnson.
go. All right. Thank you so much. That's the best news. They're shaking hands. This is the best part of the Bronx. Listen, you have both really represented our home borough beautifully tonight and passionately, which is what we respect. Thank you so much, Martin Prince, Roxanne.
Thank you so
Delgado.
much. Thank you.
These are our people from the Bronx. Beautiful. If you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then please send us an email at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org. You can send us a tweet at BronxTalk. We'll relay the messages as well. You can post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. You can check out the archives at bronxnet.org. You'll find Bronx Talk by following the watch menu on the new Bronxnet website. Next week, a political debate. If you thought this debate wasn't enough, we'll present the debate
okay.
for the
We're fine.
87th
We're fine.
Assembly District between Democrat Carinas Reyes and Republican Alpheus Marcus. So we will see you then. We thank our producer, Helen Greenberg. Our director is Nick Marrero, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye. And I'm going to shake everybody's hand. Thank you so much. Listen, it's